Okay, hello again. As for understanding the prompt on Thoreau in the Mexican-American War, I will attempt to go over it here. The prompt is, and I added two little videos. Here is a way to listen to civil disobedience if you prefer listening to reading. And here is a very short video, 5.5 minutes, on Thoreau that some of you have already used for your annotated bibliographies. Alright, this prompt says, whoops, I'm on the wrong one, sorry. This prompt on Thoreau says, do some research on the Mexican-American War and decide whether or not there were any significant ethical concerns that warranted Thoreau's reaction. Who was fighting? Who started the war? What were President Polk's intentions, and were those intentions ethical? Ethical means, were they morally correct? It's kind of like arguing about whether the atom bomb was morally correct. And people can go on both sides of the fence there. So, basically, the USA initiated a fight with Mexico after Mexico refused to sell the land to us, to President Polk, that he wanted. And that would be an interesting way of getting land. Because, so far as I know, it is not standard that if someone wants to buy your country, you are required to sell it. So, the Mexican government did not want to sell land to the USA. And so we found a way to pick a fight. You know, if you want to interpret it that way, I do. But anyway, that's what Thoreau objected to. In those days, taxes used to be specific. Like, you're being taxed for the war. You're being taxed for upholding slavery. Now you don't know what you're being taxed for. You just have to pay the tax, and the governments get to decide what to do with it. We do vote, but nonetheless, if a war breaks out, we pay for it. And our taxes are not divided the way they were during Thoreau's times for obvious reasons, because they didn't want people saying, oh no, we're not going to pay. So basically, what is this prompt asking? It's asking, was this an ethical war or was it an unethical war? Did Thoreau have a good reason for getting angry or not? You get to make up your mind and take a position. So let us look at what two other essays did. In this one, and I have now added, I've added the prompt to the top in my example research essays in Module 3. So this is where I found it, in Module 3. In fact, to prove it to you, I will go back to the course. There's Module 1. Module 1. Tips for editing. By the way, that's something that everyone should have read. How to write a 5-paragraph essay. I wrote that for you. Okay, hold on a second. Right, Module 2, Module 3. Module 3 has example research essays. Okay, so I put the prompts at the top. Alright, so for Thoreau, I read it to you already. And here is one example essay. The title is An Ethical Decision. So already in the title, I know where the student stands. The student has taken a position. Sometimes if you don't know what your position is, look at the bottom of your essay, the very end, and you'll see, oh, I did take a position. And that needs to go into the thesis and the title. Declaring war is the last resort any country wants to turn to when it is having problems with another country. Okay, I agree with that. That got my attention. Why? Wars are very costly. And besides needing the manpower of a country's army to go fight the war, Countries also rely heavily on natural resources to build, fuel, and move the equipment needed to win the war. So there's all kinds of reasons given right there why declaring war is the last resort that any country should resort to. We like to think that wars are fought to stop an injustice and to help the victims of that injustice. Good argument. People of any nation hold on to this idea. One thing no one can deny is that wars are always won by the stronger country. The country that is most technologically advanced wins over other countries that may have more soldiers. So the student is continuing to explain the dynamics of war and how they work. The loss of life from military and innocent civilian casualties is not only grief to civilians, but it can bring shame to the victorious nation after the dead are counted. Is there such a thing as an ethical war? If war is declared to stop the mistreatment of a specific race or religious group, then perhaps this is more than enough of a reason to go to war. But is it still ethical? War is never ethical. So that's the writer's position. And you have the complete legitimate right to take a position so long as you support it. Support it means tell us why you're right. If countries tried to resolve their disagreements ethically, war would never happen. As soon as there is loss of life, a disagreement is no longer ethical. In the case of the Mexican-American War, Henry David Thoreau, an American writer during that era, kept a journal and wrote down his argument for opposing said war. His writing on his opposition to the war would later be published entitled Civil Disobedience. Henry David Thoreau greatly opposed the war based on the fact that he considered it unethical in regards to both the treatment of America's neighbor and to the likelihood that an increase of American territory might prolong and widen the practice of slavery. So that student has taken a very strong stance and written a wonderful thesis statement to address the prompt. I know what to expect, and I suspect that there's going to be some history that will explain how the war started, which is exactly what happens. You can see at the beginning of the next paragraph, James Polk was the President of the United States when the Mexican-American War began. So it's going to explain to me, which is what I would expect, how the war started, why, and then show me how it's unethical. Another example, because we don't all have to write the same thing, is here in this one. Questions pertaining to the ethics of the Mexican-American War. This author shows us that the ethics of the Mexican-American War are going to be evaluated. The position of the author is not clear from the title, but I expect it will be clear, because this was a very good writer who got an A, in the thesis statement. In 1783, the United States of America was a newly established nation that had recently acquired its independence from England. Nicely done. In the early years of the nation, expanding its territorial boundaries was one of the main priorities. Yes, that is quite true. Within 20 years, the United States of America acquired the Louisiana Territory, which in turn doubled the size of the country. Good. While the U.S. continued its expansion, Mexico acquired independence from Spain in 1821. It was not long before the U.S. government, under President James K. Polk's order, declared war on Mexico in order to obtain Texas as the newest addition and 28th state to the nation. And that's fair enough, because the state of Texas, which was actually its own country for 10 years, has a lot to do with the beginning of the Mexican-American War, because things happened that made Mexico angry and that made the USA angry, and you might want to bring up the fact that we were divided. The USA was divided into an even number of slave states and free states. Free states were states where people could not be slaves. And there was a lot of arguing about that. The people who, just like there's a lot of arguing today between the most Republicans, not all, and most Democrats about various things, like with the last election. And so it should comfort you to know that we've always been arguing. The world has always been arguing, but they used to argue about that there had to be exactly the same number of slave states and free states. The people who were for the free states did not want the slave states to be more, because then we would be a major slaveholding country rather than slaveholding South, slaveholding states. So Texas was slaveholding, and that actually, just off the top of my head, one of the problems why Texas became its own country, one of the reasons was from the fact that Mexico outlawed slavery earlier than we did. And the people who had come to settle in Texas, who were a lot of them were white, Protestants, wanted slaves. So when Texas said when Mexico said no, you can't have slaves, they said, okay, fine, we're going to be our own country. And that lasted for about 10 years. And after, at the end of it, America secretly sent people to try and convince Texas to join the USA. But then it joined as a slave state, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so where was I? I'm talking about that. Okay, it was not long before the U.S. government declared war on Mexico. Okay, I read that one too. Henry David Thoreau, a leading American transcendentalist, that was a philosophy he followed, and philosopher, strongly opposed the Mexican-American War and believed it to be imperative for society to disobey unjust laws, such as the war against Mexico. And that's an interesting argument right there, but we had that in that's part of what civil disobedience is about. Should you obey a law that's unjust? In Thoreau's essay, Civil Disobedience, he made it very clear that civilization's comforts often rob people of independence. We as a society question the authority that the government holds and refuse allegiance if and when the government acts in an unethical manner. Thoreau's negative beliefs and concerns were warranted, so the author's taking a stand now, as the war against Mexico, led by President James K. Polk, remains one of the most unethical and aggressive wars in U.S. history, as it stole land from Mexico for all the wrong reasons, attempted to further expand slavery, and eventually set the stage for the American Civil War. Well, it actually did do that. Now I've had people argue that the Mexican-American War was warranted, and they've done such a good job in their essays that they got A's too. So it's all, and same thing for the atom bomb. I mean, I'm not a proponent of the atom bomb. I wish that it had never been dropped. When I took a Japanese course, at Fresno City College, the first thing the teacher did was show us where Hiroshima and Nagasaki are on the map. It's obviously still a very sore point with Japanese people, understandably. So it's one of those things we disagree about. And when we disagree about something, it becomes more interesting. So if you want to say that Thoreau's disobedience and his dismay with the Mexican-American War was unwarranted, that he did not understand how important it was for America to rule from sea to sea, you go right ahead. You're going to need good support, but you could get an A. I'm not against you if you want to do that. I can't believe I've been talking this long. And I just want to show you one more thing. Oh, it's going to close itself. Over here, I've been showing people that when you refer to a world of ideas, let's see, where is it? Thoreau. See, you've got to put the name of the author who wrote the piece, not Jacobus. You only write Jacobus's name first if you are quoting from the pages that Jacobus wrote. And then it's got to be in alphabetical order. Okay, I'm done with this one. I'm going to stop recording. I hope this helps you. Email me or we can have a conference if you are confused. I don't mind.